Hey guys! Today we're going to animate another walk cycle, but this time we'll spice it up a bit by adding some personality to it. In the previous lesson, we talked about storytelling and how the environment can help with that. But because this is still just a stationary walk cycle and the character isn't really going anywhere, we will keep it simple and just have a basic floor. So the first thing we need to decide on is the type of walk that we want to do. You can either shoot your own reference or look it up online. I really love this video called 100 Ways to Walk, so I just went ahead and downloaded it and then picked this angry walk cycle to work with. Also, a quick warning that when you download videos from YouTube, they will most likely be playing at 30 frames per second, so just change it to 24 frames before you start animating. I use DaVinci to do that because I find that to be the easiest way, but if you don't know how to do this, go to Blender Basics and watch the video called Changing the Frame Rate in DaVinci Resolve, and then you should be good to go. So I've already set up my file to have a 3/4 view on the top left and then the side view below it. And on the right side I have a perspective view that I'll also be using as a front view, just like we did with the robot walk cycle. The first thing I need to do is bring in my reference video, and that's very simple. I'm just gonna click on the camera here, go to the camera settings, you just enable background images, and you go to add image. So you don't have to change it to movie clip, just add image and click open. Find your reference, open image. Then you can protect it with this fake user to make sure that it stays in your file. And you just need to click on this refresh button for it to be playing as a video instead of a single image. So now when I scrub, you can see that my reference is playing nicely. And if you need to adjust it at all, you can just go here and scale it, rotate if you need to, and offset it and so on. But mine is good in this position where it is. And when you're setting up your camera, try to make your angle very similar to the angle of your reference, just so you can actually follow this reference nicely. If you have a side view, then I would suggest putting that side view in here, but I don't have that right now. Okay, so before we start animating, let's just look at our reference video and analyze it a little bit, just talk about some points that we will be keeping in mind while animating. Okay, so first of all, we can see a nice expression on his face that supports the acting. So he's angry, his face is also showing that he's angry. Another thing is that his hands are in fists. So there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tension in the chest, in the shoulders. The arms are pretty straight. The strides are really wide and he's walking really fast. His chest and his whole upper body is leaning forward. And there's quite a lot of rotation on the chest, side to side like this. And his legs overall stay pretty straight through these up and stride positions. And his toes go up pretty high as well, and his heels as well here. Again, there's so much tension in it. He's angry, he's marching forward pretty fast. If he was very relaxed, his body would be a lot looser, right? So that's the difference between the different personalities, different moods, and so on. And these differences in the body language are what makes the personality and the mood shine through. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to give Max some angry expression to support the acting in the shot as well. We don't want him to just have this blank stare while he's marching forward. Okay, so now we have an angry expression on Max and we're ready to start animating the body. So from our robot walk cycle, we know our 4 poses, right? We have our stride pose, then we have our passing position, and we have our down pose and our up pose. And that's true for any walk cycle you're gonna be doing, no matter how tweaked it is to match a certain personality, but just by the nature of walking, you'll be able to find those poses everywhere. and we're gonna look for them here. So I like starting my animation on frame 0. Again, you can push it to frame 1 if you want. And here in our reference file on frame 0, this is not a stride. It's somewhere between the down pose and the passing position, so that's not ideal. So what you can do is, again, select the camera, go to that background image. Up here you have offset. So on frame 0, I'm gonna start offsetting this. You see when I scrub, you can see the animation moving. So I'm gonna start offsetting it until I run into a stride position. So here he's a little bit up, and this is where his heel hits the ground. So on frame 9, and then on frame 10, he's already down like this. So I know it's this pose on frame 9. And I'm also gonna use markers for these main poses, just so later I have an easier time locating them on my timeline. So I'm gonna press M, and now I have a first marker for my stride position. Okay, let's look for our next stride. So I'm gonna scrub until I find the next stride, and it's here on frame 11. And then the next one is here on frame 23. And of course, this is a real person's walk cycle, so it can be any arbitrary amount of frames long. But lucky for us, this really resembles that speed of the walk cycle we did before, the 24 frame walk cycle, right? Or technically 25 frame walk cycle. But we're just missing one frame here, right? So instead of the first stride being on frame 12, it's on frame 11. And the second one, instead of being on frame 24, it's on frame 23. So to make my life easier, because if it's just one frame difference, I can just tweak it, I'm going to put my stride on frame 24. So I'm going to select my whole character, press I to set a key, and then instead of frame 11, I'm going to press I on frame 12. And then I'm going to grab the reference file again, and instead of frame 9, I'm going to offset it to frame 8. So just stay with me, I'm going to explain why I did this. So now my first stride, instead of being on frame 0, it's on frame 1, but then frame 12 matches. This is where the stride is when you look at the reference. It's on frame 12. And also this other stride is perfectly on frame 24. So instead of just the first frame matching, now these two are matching. So a bigger chunk of my animation is matching with the reference. And the very first pose is just offset by one frame. And what I can do when I'm sculpting my first pose, I'm gonna sculpt it on frame 1 just so I can follow this pose, and then I'm just gonna shift it to frame 0. So we are pretty much ready to start animating now, and I'm going to again key max on frame 1 just to make sure everything is keyed. And I actually hid my facial controllers because I don't want to accidentally touch them. I'm just gonna keep it at this one pose. It's just a 1 second walk cycle, so I don't want to be animating the face and then the face looping every 1 second. I'm just gonna leave it as it is, and I'm just gonna animate the body. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to get the feet in their stride position. Let me hide these controllers so they're not in the way. So anything you don't need, you can just click on and press H and it will be out of your way. So one leg goes forward, and we want a pretty wide stride, and then the foot goes up, and you can also see that the toes are curled upwards, so I'm gonna add some of that. And let me grab everything, make sure we are on constant interpolation because we're gonna be animating in step instead of spline, and then we're gonna spline the shot later. Okay, so now I have the foot that's going forward, and I'm just gonna grab the value and I'm gonna put it on this other foot, and instead of the minus sign, I'm gonna just have a plus sign, and it will go back by the same amount. I'm gonna lift the heel off the ground as well, and this doesn't have to match because you can see that the front looks like it's higher than the back, and I need these hips to be rotating with the body as well. I'm not gonna go too much because I don't want his hips to be swinging too much back and forth, but a little bit helps. And then we have this overall lean of the body forward. I'm just gonna zoom in on that a little bit. Put that in maybe this much. And because his chest is inflated, I'm just going to scale it just the tiniest bit, like this. And let's see if adding a little bit of rotation to it works as well. Let's bring the arms down. I'm gonna grab one of the arms, and we have this butterfly icon here, which you can use, or I have mine set to the shortcut X, so I'll press X, and then I can bring the arms down at the same time. And I can bring them back a little bit. Of course, they're gonna be different on each side, but for now, I'm just doing the main posing, so I can just use the symmetry tool. And let's give him quick fists. You can just grab this controller here and scale it down until you get a nice fist on both sides. Okay, I'm gonna turn off my symmetry. And so the thing about these shoulders, his shoulders are pretty much just pushed down, and you can do that. Actually, let me use my symmetry. You can push them down and do this, but I was also playing around with it before recording the lesson, and I really liked how the shoulders looked going up like this. And I know this doesn't follow the reference exactly, but this is just a deviation I decided to make, and it's not a big one because it's just gonna stay pretty much the same throughout the animation. There's just gonna be a little bit of motion on the shoulders, but I'm just gonna leave them up like this. In real life, we don't really walk around angry with our shoulders up, but in animation, that's kind of a thing you see a lot, and I think it reads pretty well. So basically, because the right foot is in the front right now, the arms do the opposite, so the left arm is going to be a little bit forward. Then I'm also going to rotate this hand slightly forward and inwards. And there is a little bit of bend on the elbow, as you can see. So the elbows only move on the x-axis in real life, so I'm just gonna use that one. And overall, you can see my arm is more in the middle of the body, but his is closer to the back of the body. So I'm just going to move it back a little bit more, and then I'm going to push this arm even more back. Let's also add that wrist rotation to this one as well. His face looks kind of funny from this angle, but we're animating to camera, and from here it looks better, so just ignore that. I think we need to bring the cog a little bit lower. But now, because we have it rotated forward, if you do it on the z-axis like this, you're also moving the y-axis, right? You can see the numbers changing here. And for these treadmill walks, we don't want that. We want the cog just staying in the same spot in terms of the y-axis. We don't want it to be going back and forth. Just because, again, when you convert it to a forward walk, instead of the character just moving gradually forward, it's gonna be doing little twitches back and forth, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to switch my axis to global for these adjustments here. And then you can see in this transform box that we're only moving the z-axis. Okay, maybe he's leaning forward a little too much, so let's do this. And then to push the pose even more, let's grab the neck, and let's grab the neck forward too. And then push the head down a little bit. And you can see right away that it looks more angry. He has his head down and he's looking up. Just be careful, don't go too far down, because then your eyes are gonna be covered by the eyebrows. So just find a sweet spot somewhere. And in the side view, you can also see that that looks better. And another weird thing I just noticed, because we haven't been checking the side view too much, is this chest. We haven't rotated the chest yet, right? So the chest moves with the arms. Since the left arm is in the front, the torso is gonna do the same thing. So basically it's the opposite of the hips. The hips follow the legs, and then the torso follows the arms. And I have to change back to my local axis for it to be rotated properly. So let me bring it this way. And I have a feeling I can move that neck a little bit more even. Yeah, that looks better to me. Let me just add a little bit more bend to this elbow. And I can also use these tweakers. If the arm is kind of bending forward like this, I can just grab the tweaker and do that, and do the same on the other side. Just kind of reinforcing that curve of the arm. So for now, let's say that this is our stride pose. And since I made it on frame 1, I'm gonna key everything and I'm just gonna grab that key and bring it to frame 0. So I use this for reference, now I don't need it. I'm gonna bring it to frame 0 and this is where my actual stride is. I'm gonna grab it with Ctrl C and I'm gonna paste it, Ctrl V, to my frame 24, which is the last frame of the animation. And then I can change my timeline to 23 frames because we know our timeline is 1 frame less than our walk cycle. And I'm gonna make a marker here and then go to frame 12, which is my opposite stride, add a marker, and I'm going to press Ctrl Shift V to reverse that pose. So now we have all of our 3 strides ready to go. Okay, so let's play that. You don't see much, but you can see the poses flipping between one and the other. Okay, now we're gonna go to our passing position, which is exactly between, and so from frame 0 to frame 12 divided by 2 is frame 6. So this is what our passing position is going to look like. And I'm going to start very simple, like I did with the robot, because it helps me. I'm going to press Shift E and then 50 to get the exact 50% value. And now I'm gonna start tweaking it. So I know that my toes on this left foot are gonna be on the ground now. I'm gonna change X rotation to 0. I'm also gonna make sure that my heel is 0. And then for this foot, you can see it's not exactly in the middle, it's a little bit back. And of course it's lifted off the ground. And then I'm also gonna use this foot controller to rotate the foot this way. The cog needs to go up. I'm gonna change to global, bring it up to where the leg is pretty straight. I'm just gonna have just the slightest bend to the knee. And because we got a perfect 50% value on this rotation here, on the pelvis or on the hips, it's 0 degrees now, but because the foot is in the back a little bit, it's not exactly in the middle, I'm just gonna add a slight rotation to it to favor that side. And we know that in the passing position, the weight has to be over 1 foot. So I'm gonna move that to the foot that's standing on the ground. And the hip also has to go up because it's carrying the weight. Just like that. Now having done that, I think this foot needs to go higher and rotate more. And perhaps go a little bit back as well. And here in the side view, you can make sure that the foot is actually off the ground, it's not intersecting the floor. And then just like we did with the robot, I'm going to add a little bit of rotation on this foot to make it more interesting. Maybe rotate it outwards a little bit and push it out. Just so it's not always going on one perfect line without any rotations, because that doesn't look as natural as when you have a little bit of variation there. Okay, now for the chest, we're gonna do the opposite of what the pelvis is doing. I'm going to add a little bit of that rotation on this cog, but most of it on this chest here. Let's bring it slightly sideways. My arm is now going through the body, so I'll push it away. And I think something we should have done also is adding slight X rotation to rotate the arm inwards on our stride. So I'm just gonna quickly do that. And I'm gonna delete any in-between values on that Y rotation. I just want it to always be rotated towards the body. Alright, and on this passing position, the arm is swinging back and forth. This is the midpoint between the arm being in the front and arm being in the back. And just to add a little bit of that arc to it, like a pendulum, it would be moving like this. So the wrist should be lower in the middle, right? So I'm going to grab these shoulders, press X to get the symmetry going, and I'm just gonna bring them slightly lower. And it's gonna add a little bit of bounciness to the walk as well. So you see the shoulders being higher, then lower, and then higher again. Because we pushed the screen right arm a little bit away from the body. I'm also gonna do it on this side, just a little bit. And that also gives us a little bit of a curve going this way instead of just a straighter line on the pendulum. Okay, so now we have one stride, passing, and then the other stride. Let's copy this passing position onto the other side. So key everything, select frame 6, Control C, and on frame 18, Control Shift V. And let's play what we have. So as you're doing this, look at all 3 views and see if they are working well for now. You can rotate around. I think it's good for now. Of course, we're gonna be adding some more details and little bounces and like the fine animation later, but I just wanna get all the main poses in to be able to see everything well, and after we spline, we'll be able to really get into those little details. So let's go to frame 3 and Shift E 50 to get that 50% value. And we're gonna be working on the down pose now. So the foot is already on the ground, the toes are on the ground, and the body should be at its lowest position. So I'm just gonna grab this location Z, G, Y, and bring it down. I would say that the down pose is the most difficult pose to work on because of the foot that's in the back. You can see that instead of going forward, the foot continues going back because it's still planted on the ground, right? It hasn't lifted, so it has to continue going with that belt. And ours, because we did 50%, it's already going forward. So we know that the foot on the treadmill, while it's stationary on the ground, it's gonna be moving in a linear motion. And the difference between these values is gonna be equal, but right now we can't really tell what it's gonna be, what the value is gonna be. So we're just gonna eyeball it for now, and then later when we spline, we're gonna fix it. So it looks like it can go maybe somewhere around here, I would say. And because it continues going back, we need that hip to help it out. So I'm gonna get that local axis, push it back even more, and you can see that the foot is on the ground, but it's lifting off and it's pretty much just the toes touching the ground at this point. So I'm going to leave this controller still planted on the ground. I'm gonna zero out the rotations, and I'm going to bring the Z value to 0, so it's nicely on the ground. And I'm going to bring the heel up a little bit, but you can see that when we're lifting the heel with this controller, the toes stay planted. But in our reference, the toes are bent a little bit, but then they're lifting off the ground. So I'm going to use a little bit of this, but I'm also going to use this little controller in the front called Toe Tip Pivot. And from here, you can pivot the foot from the toes. And I'm going to do that and push the toes up. And I'm gonna go until it resembles what we see in the back. Maybe use a little bit more of this heel. And now we can see that the foot can actually go back even more, because we gave ourselves the room by lifting the heel off the ground. So we don't want to overdo it. I would say going around here looks good to me. So I would argue that this is the most complicated part when it comes to the feet peeling off the ground, this down position here. But if you look at the reference and follow it, you'll be able to get it. And then on this down pose, for the bounciness, we can add a little bit of down rotation on this cog, just a little bit. And also on the chest, on the neck, and on the head. But you already know from the previous walk cycle that we're gonna be offsetting that later. Just for now, I'm just gonna keep it because we don't have all our poses in there yet, and I don't wanna complicate it. I just wanna keep all my keys on these frames 0, 3, 6, 12, and so on. And we also forgot to add markers, so I'm gonna add a marker on 6 and on 3. Okay, let's leave that, say that it's done for now. Select everything, key it, Control C, and then on frame 15, Control Shift V. Let's play it. It looks a little funny because we're missing a pose right now. So let's get the up pose down, and that will be frame 9. So I'm gonna Shift E 50 at first. I'm going to press M to get my marker. I'm also gonna mark 15 and 18. And now because it's the up pose, the cog has to be in the highest position. So I'm gonna grab frame 9, GY, and bring it up. And again, I don't wanna start stretching the foot, so it's just gonna be a little bit higher than the stride position. And this heel peeling off the ground is helping us a little bit, and you can see that his foot is peeling off the ground as well. Now the front foot, it's not very high up off the ground, and the toes are already starting to rotate upwards. So I'm gonna get rid of this rotation on the foot, the X rotation, and the toe rotation is gone. I'm just gonna reduce this X rotation on the heel and then bring the foot lower. Just making sure here that it's not touching the ground, and I'm gonna also bring it closer to that front position because it's kicking forward pretty fast. And because the foot is going forward more than 50%, I'm also going to grab the rotation on the pelvis and bring it forward some. And this is where you start getting those eases into your animation. Okay, the up position is the fastest one to do just because you already have all the other information there. And so I'm going to select everything, key it, and I'm just gonna paste it onto frame 21. And now we should have all the rough animation in there. And when we play it, it should already look pretty good, hopefully. Let me get rid of the controller so we can see better. And get the front view here and press play. So there's a little bit of a hiccup with the whole upper body going up and down or back and forth like this. And also the side to side motion seems to be a little bit too much, also on the feet going too far away from the center of the body. So those are the things I'm gonna fix right now. So grabbing the X location axis, grabbing everything, and SY to scale it towards the center, make it less. I'm gonna grab the X on the feet, and I'm also going to shrink that. And you know, these things, you can copy the exact values from one foot to the other if you want to, but I feel like it's okay if it's just a little bit different because, you know, again, it's a personality walk. This doesn't really affect the forward and backward motion on the treadmill, so why not make it a little bit different, right? You don't have to have exact values. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. And then let's see what's happening to this rotation. Oh yeah, okay, so we have the body rotate forward on the down position, but then it snaps back because we already had these keys here before. So what I'm actually going to do, on the up pose, I'm going to bring the torso a little bit up, the rotation, just like we did on the robot, and I'm gonna grab both frames 9 and frames 21 and bring the torso up a little. Maybe I'm going to reduce the down rotation a little bit as well, so it's not so prominent. And we might have the same issue here on the torso. Let's see. Yep, so do the same exact thing. And probably the head and neck as well, so I'm just gonna quickly do that. So for the down rotation, I'm leaving the value bigger than the up rotation, and that's just to not make it super equal and add a little bit of interest to the animation. Okay, let's play it now again. And that looks way better already. Their arms are kind of far away from the body. For him, I don't think they're as far away, so I'm also gonna fix that. And that is my Z rotation. So I'm grabbing all these values, bringing them down towards the center of the body. And I have a little bit of weirdness happening here where the value goes down, then up again and down again. So I think I can just smooth it out a little bit. like this. And just play around with the curve to make it look nicer. And I'll do the same exact thing on the other side. Again, not keeping it exactly equal, but just adding a little bit of variation. So play with it until it looks good. I have some bumps here. I'm just gonna delete that because I don't need that. And the X looks good. Now I can add a little bit of easing on the arms back and forth motion and just bring the in-between values a little bit closer to the extreme values. Okay, let's now check everything to make sure there aren't any weird hiccups happening like what we just saw. So I'm checking the shoulders. Everything looks good there. I know it's gonna be the same on the other side because I used the mirror tool. I'm checking the head, the hips. Yeah, so the hips go a little bit back after the stride position because of our down position, but the difference is so small right now, so I'm thinking of making it just a little bit bigger. And I can steal this value from one side and bring it to the other side. Because here I probably want it to be the same just because the foot distance from each other is the same on each side as well. And for the up and down here, I'm gonna be playing with that and changing it up a little bit too. So we can see that the foot is pretty low to the ground here already, and this back foot is still carrying the weight. So I feel like the hip should be still a little bit higher on that side, but not as high as on our passing position. So I'm just gonna bring it a little bit lower here to favor the passing position. And I will do the same on the up pose on the other side. I'll grab the rotation Z value, copy it, and paste it with the opposite sign on the other side. Okay, so it's not gonna be the perfect in-between value. It would be if the foot was higher up off the ground, then it would rotate the hip up as well. But because the foot is kind of almost grazing the ground and this foot is carrying the weight, then the hip should also reflect that. Then to just make the opposite of what's happening to the hip on our upper body, I'm gonna look at this Y rotation on the cog, and I'm gonna do the same exact thing here for the up position. So I'm going to favor the passing position. I'm going to grab that value and bring it to frame 21 with the opposite sign. And we can do the same on the chest on this Z rotation. Okay, and it seems that the upper body is still going back and forth a little too much. So I'm just gonna reduce that a little bit because he's bouncing back and forth quite aggressively. And the value jumps up a lot here. I'm just gonna bring that down quite a lot. And that seems to be a lot smoother now. So I feel like everything is working more or less as it should at this point, and it's not looking too bad. So I think we've done everything we need to do in our blocking, and we can actually spline the shot now and then start fixing stuff. And you'll see that there's always problems with knee pops for some reason with animation. So that's one thing we'll definitely have to address, and a bunch of other stuff. We're gonna start offsetting things and so on. So don't forget to save your animation. I named mine Angry Blocking 01, and I'm gonna save again, and I'm gonna call it angry spline 01. Okay, so go grab a drink and take a little bit of a break, and then we'll be ready to continue. So I'm gonna grab all of my controllers, all of my keys everywhere, and then I'm going to press T and change it to Bezier interpolation. And it's gonna look a little funny.
That's not bad.
Well, not too funny, but basically the first thing I have to do is change those feet to linear. That's the most important part. And this foot is a little complicated because the linear starts from here and continues past our 24 frames. And so we're gonna do the other foot first just to show you. So just from here, basically from frame 0, which is the strike position, all the way past the next strike position and to the down position, it has to be a linear curve. So I'll grab these keys, press T, change it to linear, and this one automatically, just because of this tangent on frame 12, this will be straight here, and then here we're gonna start getting that nice Bezier curve. So this is what you want it to look like. And now we're going to actually delete all of these keys in between, and the reason why is because remember how we had the exact same values going from frame 0 to frame 3 to frame 6 and so on, because we also always did the Shift E breakdowner to 50%. But then when we went to down position, we just eyeballed it. We didn't actually give it a value that we calculated. So even though it looks pretty equal here on this curve, there's no guarantee that it's exact. So now that I have my frame 0 and frame 15, I'm gonna delete everything in between. And now it actually didn't change. I probably got it exactly somehow. But you know, chances are it's not gonna be exact. But now that I deleted everything, the curve is gonna be perfectly straight, and you're gonna be sure that all those values between those frames, between the stride and the down, are the exact same. And we need to do that on the other side as well. And that's what I meant, that it's a little trickier here. Here you can see it pretty well, how the values curve a little bit, right? So we don't want that. And in order to get it exactly is we need to borrow this down pose, copy it, and then the next down pose would be 3 frames later. So from 24, it will be on frame 27. I'm going to paste it there just for now. And I'm gonna delete what's between. And now basically that fixes my frame 24, right? Because before it might have been a different value here, but now that I deleted it, and I have a perfectly straight line from my passing position to my next down position, frame 24 is exactly where it should be. So I'm gonna redo that key. And to make it the same as on frame 0, I'm just gonna paste it here. And now I can delete this extra key on 27 that I don't need anymore. So I just borrowed it just to be able to create that straight line and then transfer that value to the beginning. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated. If you don't get it right away, just go back in the video and just copy what I did, but hopefully it makes sense. So we definitely have some floatiness and some knee pops, and it's not as sharp as it could be. Let's start fixing that. So basically, one of the things we should do right away is these foot plants. So all the way from frame 0 to frame 3, the foot is taking its time to go down. But if you look at our reference and just remember that our actual stride pose is on frame 1 when I'm looking at this instead of my animation, because we offset it by 1 frame, how long does it take for the foot to plant? So this is our first frame, then it takes 1, it's almost on the ground, and 2, it's touching the ground. So it's gonna take 2 frames. For us, it's taking 1, 2, 3 frames. So I wanna grab frame 3, bring it 1 frame back, because it's gonna take 2 frames for the foot to plant. And on frame 1, it should be close to being planted. So I'm bringing that value down a little bit closer to 0. And then let's do the same thing on the other side. We're gonna find that pose. Again, bring the down position 1 frame earlier. And create another key in between and bring it down closer to 0. Now the feet planting on the ground are more snappy. And we wanted to offset the rotation X on the upper body when the body goes to the down position and to the up position. I'm gonna leave the rotation on the cog exactly where it is. I'm just gonna reduce it even more because I still feel like it's a lot. And now I have the chest to offset, the neck, and the head. So first I'm gonna grab the chest, just the X rotation. Actually, we haven't even made our cycle yet, and we need that for these offsets. So grab the whole body, grab all of your keys, Shift E, make cyclic. Now when we scrap past and before the animation, we still see the walk cycle going. And now we're able to start offsetting these values. So I'm gonna grab the rotation X on the chest, and I'm just gonna offset it by 1 frame by pressing GX1. And then on the neck, I'm gonna do the same just on the X again, GX2. And on the head, I'm gonna do that with 3 frames, GX3. And see what that gives us. So you can see there's a lot more bounciness to the head and the chest and everything here. So it's not as stiff as it was before. It's still pretty stiff because based on this reference, but there is a little bit of a breakup to make it more interesting and realistic, right? Because when the body hits the ground, there is a chain reaction going up the body. Not everything will hit at the same time, so you need that offset there. Now we can also see the back foot is acting a little weird when it lifts off the ground. It goes back and then it just goes straight forward. So we need a little bit of breakdown here. I'm gonna grab the foot, I'm gonna bring it higher, and then I'm going to push this rotation on the toes. And I feel like the foot still needs to be dragging behind more. It's going forward a little too fast, so I'm just gonna grab both of these keys, bring them higher. This looks more like the reference in my opinion. Still wanna keep the foot rotating. So this peel off the ground is a little tricky to do, but you know, you just have to massage it until you get it right. And also there's just a little bit of an pivot issue with this controller on our rig, which you can see that when you use it, it lifts the foot a little bit off the ground. So we might be fixing that, but if you have that issue, just bring the foot a little lower to hit the ground again. Just making sure it's not going through the ground here. And then just bring it lower. Now we have the toe lifting off the ground already too soon, I think. So I'm gonna zero it out through here and through here. Now it's peeling nicely off the ground, and then the toe is lifting towards here. But I think on frame 9, sorry, I have to give you a better view. I'm looking here right now, but on frame 9, I don't think the toe needs to be as high as it is right now. Kind of like that. Now, in terms of the height of the foot, it's pretty much already grazing the ground on frame 11 and 12, which we don't really want. Because when you look at the reference, the heel is off the ground. You can see the shadow underneath it, and then it hits the ground on frame 12. So I'm gonna grab that foot, and on frame 11, I'm gonna bring it higher. Like that. And then it hits on frame 12. And you can also see that on frame 11, the foot is rotated up higher than on frame 12, and then it continues hitting the ground. So I'm gonna grab that heel, bring it higher, and then it goes lower already on this frame. And because we did so much work on this one side, on the foot in general, with all these different controllers, I don't want to do it again on the other side and just remember what I did. I'm just gonna copy it from one side to the other, and I think it's also good to do that just to show you how I would approach doing that. So basically, I'm gonna grab all these 3 controllers that I used, and then again I'm just gonna select all the keys, and I'm gonna Control C, and I'm not just gonna mirror paste it on the other side on this frame. I'm gonna grab all those controllers on the other side, and I'm gonna go to frame 12, and that's where I'm gonna paste it, because the step is offset by 12 frames, so I can't just paste it on the other side. And I'm gonna make sure everything is keyed on frame 12, and I'm gonna delete all these keys that come before and come after. And now from frame 12, I'm just going to Control-Shift-V, the animation, and go to frame -12 and Control-Shift-V. Now I'll make sure everything is keyed on my frame 024 and delete the rest of the animation that I don't need, because I don't want it to be affecting my loops. And now when I play it, it will work perfectly. Okay, so that's the trick with the feet, or anything really where it's offset by a certain amount of frames. You just go to that frame where it changes from one side to the other. So for us it's frame 12. Make sure there is a key, because you can't paste values in Blender if there is no channel keyed, right? So key everything again, delete one side, delete the other, mirror paste from frame 12, and then because you won't have any keys on this side yet, go to -12, copy paste again, and then just delete everything before frame 0 and after frame 24, otherwise you're gonna mess up your loops. And now you have a perfect mirror paste with offset. So I didn't have to do that work twice. Okay, now let's see what else we can do. Now we start looking at these wavy curves, and we don't want that. We're gonna start actually adding we're gonna start adding eases here. So I'll grab these 2 keys and these 2 keys, S, Y. Just gonna push them up towards the other 2 frames, or I can just do it manually and grab everything, press V, auto clamped, and it fixes my curve, and now I have these offsets. Okay, so now my curve looks better. And you want to go through all of your controllers that you animated and just want to make sure that there isn't anything weird happening, any hiccup or the tangents look wrong, and start adding eases where you can. So here we already have an ease that we created before, and I'm just gonna look at it and see if it makes sense. So I'm gonna grab my key here, GY, and I'm just gonna wiggle it. And this is the up and down on the cog. Now we have the up and down looking good, but I'm wondering if we can push either that or the down pose, because right now there isn't much difference between the two, but in a reference there is. So let me try both. Let me bring the down pose lower a little bit, and it's helping with my back foot too, because you can see that it's starting to get stretched through here on my side view. It's starting to look a little odd. So I'm just gonna bring that down, and let's see if I can bring my stride pose a little bit higher. And it's letting me, like I still have some bend to the knees, so I can afford to bring it a little bit higher, and that might work a little better. Now there's a little bit more bounce to the body. And you want to remember that our stride position and our up position, they aren't really that different from each other. Like, yes, you go up higher, but the difference shouldn't be that big, because otherwise the character will look like they're getting on their tippy toes every time they go on the up position. Okay, let's look at other stuff. So if we want, we can add a little bit of easing in here as well. I'm just gonna paste it, move these, paste that, and it's not too much, but there's a little bit of easing now thanks to these tangents being stretched. Okay, so here, because the body hits the ground on the lowest position on frame 3, I feel like we can also make the body move most side to side on frame 3 as well. And then we'll have the opposite happening on the other side. So we're adding a little bit of an east curve like that. So we have an ease out and then drop into the down position, and then it eases into the up position and it drops again. And I feel like it wouldn't hurt offsetting it by 1 frame. Let's see what that looks like. I feel like it adds a little bit more swing to the upper body, which is not bad. I feel like that we could leave that. And then here we have just the regular easing that we need to do. Maybe push it just a little more. And that's it. Let's look at our hips. There isn't any translation on them, but there's rotation. So let's see what's happening here. So this is the up and down this way rotation, which I feel is so minuscule here. We didn't really add any, but I'm just gonna bring this value down because it's jumping up so high for some reason. And this value here, we didn't actually do it on purpose, but I think it's just left over from using this global axis by accident. You can see the channel box value rotating a little bit, so we don't really have to pay attention to that. It's fine. Now we have the Y rotation, which is this way. And I have a feeling that we need a little bit more, just because look how far the foot is going. I'm gonna push that a little bit. Maybe instead of rotating it more this way, because it's also affecting my knee in the front. So I'm just gonna push the rotation on the down just a little bit more. And of course I'm gonna steal that value and put it on the other side, just so it's equal. And then the foot is dragging behind, so I'm gonna bring the value back. And here it's kicking forward, I'm gonna bring it up. And same thing on the other side. And now this one is the rotation X, and that's based on how much weight is being carried by the hips. Okay, so the weight is equal on this frame. And then the body drops into the down pose before the body lifts upwards. And I have a feeling that we should probably push this up quite a lot, make it favor the passing position, just because we want to really feel that bump when the hips catch all this weight, which it might even temporarily carry more weight than the passing position. Since here, this foot is lifted off the ground, so it pushes that side of the hip up a little bit. But here, this foot is not really carrying any weight anymore. It's getting ready to lift off the ground on the next frame. And this foot is carrying a lot, plus the body just dropped down. So I'm thinking maybe I can bring it even higher than the passing position, which is definitely a choice that in the usual formula, you have the most weight being carried in the passing position, but this is personality walking. You can start pushing the spacing a little bit, just making it work with the type of walk that you're animating. So I'm pushing it up more, just a little bit. Then we have our passing position. And then in our up position, the foot is pretty close to the ground, and it's kind of similar to how the pose looks on frame 12. So I'm just gonna start bringing this lower. Then we have our stride position, and then again the hip should drop down quite a lot. And I can just steal this value on rotation Z to make it easier for me. And then push this up a little bit. And there we go. So this curve doesn't look as pretty as some of the other curves, but it's still pretty smooth. There aren't any obvious hiccups, and it's actually describing what's happening and what we want to happen. Something that's kind of dangerous when you're first starting out is always wanting to have the perfect smooth curves. And the danger in that is sometimes you might actually delete a little bit of those eases or slight hiccups that you want to have on your curves, right? So here I want to have the down position higher than my crossing position, and then it slowly eases into the passing position and it drops again, right? So I'm just gonna leave it like this. I don't want to clean it up and bring this lower to make it prettier. Okay, so those are the hips. And now we have the torso to work on. So basically I'm going from the center of the body and I'm working my way up. We already offset this chest rotation forward by 1 frame. And now I'm just gonna add those eases here as well, like I did on the cog. And this bottom one already is pretty eased in, so that's fine. Now here, again, eases. And now we have the Z, which is the body doing this. So just like with the hips, we made them drop the most on the bottom pose. I'm gonna do the same here. And then I'm gonna steal that rotation. Okay, so it's again gonna look something like this. If I zoom out, you can see it. Ease, drop, ease, drop, ease, drop. And then we have, again, those eases to add. It's pretty repetitive sometimes because it's the same exact motion. Same thing on the head. And we can do that with the shoulders as well. I'm just gonna grab the X rotation on both sides at the same time, just so it's easier. Oops. Let's do it here. And now we can play with the elbows a little bit. Actually, first let's just do this quick ease, just for it to look better. And now we can start dragging the elbow a little bit. Now let's be careful because we know that the arms are supposed to be pretty stiff, but maybe when the arm is going back, there can be just a little bit more of a rotation happening. And then push it just slightly here as well. And then at this point, it's gonna be where we had it before. So I'm not gonna touch this frame or the stride frame, but on the way back, maybe it can go back a little bit, just slightly. And same here. And again, I'm not gonna touch it anymore on frame 21, on frame 24. So it's very subtle, but there's just slight drag happening on that arm. And I'm gonna add a little bit of that on the wrist as well. First, let me fix these guys. And then once we do this side, we're just gonna copy paste that animation onto the other side, so it's easy. So mostly our back and forth is the X rotation. I'm gonna go there, leave it on my frame 1, add some drag on frame 3, help it on frame 6 as well, leave it on frame 9 and 12, and then on frame 15 add a little bit of drag. And you want to be very subtle in this case. Sometimes when you have a more relaxed walk, you can do a lot more drag, but here we want to have it just where you can't really see it, but you can feel it, if that makes sense. Add it a little bit here, and then leave these other 2 frames as they are. Actually, here this one is a little higher. Let's bring it down. Same here. Alright, so again, it's not a pretty curve, but it's a curve that describes what we want. So let me grab the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder just in case, and the clavicle here. And with everything selected on frame 0, I'm going to Control C and then Control Shift M to select the other side quickly. I'm going to go to frame 12, make sure everything is keyed, delete everything before and after, Control Shift V, go to -12, Control Shift V, keep my frame 0, my frame 24, and then delete everything else before and after. And now my animation is perfectly pasted onto the other side. Yeah, so you can actually read the drag a little bit on the wrist. It might be a little bit too much in that case, so I might grab it and just make it a little bit smaller. I'm just gonna grab all of these keys, all of these keys, and scale them down a little bit. And you can still see it, but it's more subtle now, so I like that. Don't forget to save your file once in a while, because I know I do. Okay, and now scrubbing and looking at the foot here, you can see it goes back nicely, and then it feels like it gets pushed back again. And this is because the foot is not going high enough, right? It's starting to stretch, and that's not good. So a couple of things we need to push. One probably being the heel, bring it up a little bit. And then what we can also do on frame 2, so the frame before, making that rotation less on these toes, on the toe pivot, because it doesn't need to be as high yet as it is right now. So I'm gonna bring it down, and now you can see that it doesn't feel like it's being janked backwards. It's peeling off the ground a lot nicer. Here we might just ease it back a little bit. Yeah, so here, this area around the down position where the foot is peeling off the ground, it's very difficult. And also when the foot is landing on the ground here, that's also very difficult because you usually get knee pops there. So those are the two things you really need to pay attention to towards the end of your animation, when everything else is working. The up and down is already working, you know, because if you change that, it's gonna change what's happening down here as well on your knees. So once you're happy with the animation in the midsection, that's where you can actually start fixing these little things. Now I think through here, the foot might be a little bit too high off the ground. I'm just gonna bring it down a little. And yeah, it kicks up nicely and then it goes down. Through here, when I'm looking at that same foot, here it feels like the angle is the same on frame 0 and on frame 1. So I might actually need to start lifting it higher off the ground here. Because I also want the knee to start bending here. Higher, higher, and higher. And that works fine. Maybe we can start helping it just a little bit more. And now scrubbing this, it feels a lot better to me. And just like before, I don't want to do this on the other side. So I'm just gonna grab everything that I think I have moved, even the ones that maybe I haven't, but doesn't hurt taking those with me just in case, and copy it to the other side. Okay, so I feel like the feet, they look a lot better. They don't feel like they're being pushed too far back anymore compared to how they were before. And something else I've noticed about this particular walk cycle is that the arms aren't their widest from each other on the passing position like we would do if we've just followed that animation formula, but they feel like they're offset by a couple of frames. So when you look at it around here, this arm, it starts going forward, it hits the extreme around here already, and then it starts going back before the foot even hits the ground. Can you see it? It's very subtle, but it's already going back. It's not going forward anymore, but the foot hasn't hit the ground yet. So I'm thinking that we should do that as well. It will be kind of interesting. And we're gonna grab both arms. And just everything on them, we're gonna grab it and do GX minus 2 because it's gonna happen before, it's gonna happen sooner. So it looks more interesting. I feel like it matches what's happening on our reference video more. But now, because we have the arms swinging sooner, this rotation Y on the chest should also be happening sooner. And we can either do 2 frames as well, or do 1 frame, and that way we're actually offsetting the chest both from the body, but we're also offsetting it from the arms. So maybe we'll do GX minus 1, and that way, again, there's just a little bit more texture to the shot where body parts aren't reaching the extreme position at the same time. So I think that's pretty cool. And we didn't actually bring the shoulders with us when we moved the arms, and we should. They are the ones helping us create that little pendulum. So I'm gonna grab both shoulders, all the keys, GX minus 2, because they should match with the arms. They're directly affecting them as opposed to the chest that's following. And that's okay if it's just offset by 1 frame less. So now if I grab everything, we can see that we don't have keys just from frame 0 to 24 anymore. We have keys happening before and after because everything is offset by 1, 2, or even 3 frames when it comes to the head. So now you don't want to actually delete these frames. You want to make sure you have them because they're part of the loop, but you just want to make sure, for example, on the head here, on the X rotation, since it's offset by 3 frames, the first frame should also be offset by 3 frames. You shouldn't be adding a key to 0 because now you see what happens. You're messing up your loop. So your cycle should always be 24 frames long on all of these different controllers because our animation is 24 frames long. So I think at this point it would be a good idea to actually play blast our animation. So make sure you set everything up on your computer the way you should and go to view and viewport render animation, and it's gonna render out our camera view. Okay, so we're not really getting too many knee pops in this case, but I'm gonna still show you what you would do if you are getting knee pops. And we're also gonna look at what the arms would look like if the shoulders were a lot lower. Actually, I'm still curious what that's gonna give us, and maybe we're gonna like it more. We'll see. So let's do the shoulders first because that's an easy one. Let me just grab one shoulder and use the symmetry tool, and I'm gonna use the Animate add-on to do that just because that's the easiest way I can think of, and it's free so anybody can use it. I'm going to make sure I say it in case it crashes. I'm going to activate the add-on and I'm just gonna bring the shoulders down like this. Which I already don't like it because Max's neck looks really long like a goose, but you know, just out of curiosity. And I'm gonna deactivate the tool now. So basically what it does is you change the position on 1 frame, but it globally changes the curve throughout the animation. So you don't have to basically be adjusting every frame. Yeah, so now it definitely looks more like a reference because his shoulders are being pushed back, but it also looks a little bit silly in my opinion. So I definitely do like the shoulders up more. So I'm just going to undo that, but it's good to see what that would look like. And let's talk about the knee pops a little bit. So knee pops can happen easily. Let's say your heel right here. You know how we made it higher on our pose before the stride, and then it's lower here because it's hitting the ground. And that's what the reference is telling us. But let's say, oops, let's take off the symmetry tool. But let's say I don't have my heel as high on my pose before the stride as the stride position. Now what's gonna happen is the leg is a little bit overstretched. Then it hits the ground and then it abruptly changes direction. So basically it was straight through here and then it pops. Luckily we don't really have knee pops right now, And I think that's because we have a good ratio of how high our pelvis is on this stride pose and how high this heel is and everything else. So if, let's say, your pelvis is higher on this stride position, then you can start seeing these pops happening in the knee, right? And when you're looking at it, it pops every time he goes down. And you don't really want that. So basically, this is where you start massaging your animation. So maybe your cog needs to go lower, right? And maybe you need to start pushing these heels a little bit higher just so you don't get that pop. And also what really helps in this case, I think, is that before the stride position, we have the heel a little bit higher, which we based off of our reference here. Because if it's lower, then you can see the leg starts getting stretched. And then it's straight, and it pops down, right? So you don't really want that. You want it to be a little bit smoother. But sometimes that's actually really hard to do. So if you've tried everything and your animation is looking good, it's just you're getting some knee pops that you can't really get rid of without messing up your animation, what you can do is open the Max UI and open these leg tweakers, and then you have these knee controllers that you can play with. So you're gonna just start forcing a little bit of bend to the knee, because there's no reason you should mess up the whole chain of your animation throughout the body trying to fix this knee pop if everything else is looking good, right? So then you can just turn on your motion paths, for example, if that helps, and then you can just start tweaking those knees. But the knees should always be pretty much the last thing you're touching. Now, if they're really obvious pops, that's usually because you're overstretching the knees, right? So you never want to start stretching the knees once they buckle and they go up like this. Just looking at the pose, it doesn't look stretched, but you know it is because you have to go down quite a lot before the knees start bending again. So you don't want to do that. You always want to have just at least a couple of pixels before that stretch, and that's really going to help you. And I think that's pretty much it, actually. Let's look at the animation one more time. So there is some swing to the arms, but they never really cross the body. You can see that on the stride position, they're still going through the body instead of being somewhere here. The body is constantly pushed forward, even though it goes up and down a little bit, but overall it's pushed forward. And on the down position, the foot continues going back, and this is where you have to play around with the foot peeling nicely off the ground without having those knee pops there. Something else that's specific to this animation is that on the up pose, the foot isn't really lifting too high off the ground like you would see in, for example, the Richard Williams picture, which add the picture on the screen here. There you see the foot going pretty high up, but in this specific animation, we don't have that. And then the other interesting thing that was specific to this walk is the arms being offset by like 2 frames and leading the motion, and just overall kind of the body being pretty stiff as he's walking forward. The strides are very big and they happen really fast because he's marching forward, and the neck is being pushed forward quite a lot as well. So yeah, this was the first time we actually did a full walk cycle from blocking all the way into spline and polish. So I hope that made sense to you and it helps you create your own walk cycle. Again, when you do this, pick some personality. You can either use this video that I used and just pick something from there, or create your own walk cycle reference. But it's just a little bit harder if you're doing a treadmill animation, because when you're recording yourself, you're obviously walking forward, right? And your perspective changes. But if you have a treadmill at home, that's easy to do. And don't forget to add a nice expression that supports the type of walk you're doing. And if you really want to, you can also add a background. In the next video, I'm gonna show you how to change the stationary walk into a forward walk. So you could use the background with that if you want. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the lesson and you learned something, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye!